Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the used Defiance, staring at the star charts displayed on the main screen. The exploration vessel had been traveling through the outer rim of human space for 3 weeks, mapping new systems and looking for signs of life. So far they had found nothing but empty space and dead rocks. "Captain, we're picking up something on long-range sensors," announced Lieutenant Commander Lisa Harper from her station. "It's big, sir, really big." Jake turned to face her. "How big are we talking about?" "At least 10 times the size of our ship, maybe more. It's made of some kind of metal we've never seen before, and sir, it's moving toward us." Jake felt his stomach tighten. The human race had been exploring space for over 200 years, and this was the first time they had encountered anything that might be alien technology. "All stop. Raise shields and charge the weapons, but don't target anything yet. I don't want to start a fight if we don't have to." The bridge crew moved quickly to follow his orders. Within minutes, the unknown vessel appeared on their main screen. It was massive and shaped like a long spear, with strange symbols glowing along its hull. The ship looked ancient but powerful, like something out of a mythology book. "Incoming transmission, sir," reported Communications Officer Danny Kim. "It's on all frequencies. Put it through." The main screen flickered and changed to show a tall, thin alien with blue skin and 4 arms. The creature wore an elaborate uniform covered in medals and ribbons. Its eyes were large and golden, and when it spoke, its voice was deep and commanding. "I am High Admiral Zeph Kerr of the Valanthi species, commanding vessel of the Galaxy Empire's Survey Division. You are representatives of a previously unknown species inhabiting this sector of space. By the ancient laws of the Empire, you will submit to our authority and prepare for integration into our glorious civilization." Jake looked around the bridge. His crew was staring at the alien with mixed expressions of fear and curiosity. He had trained for first contact scenarios, but nothing had prepared him for this. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Defiance. We come in peace and wish to establish friendly relations with your people." The alien's expression didn't change. "Peace is irrelevant. You will lower your defensive systems and prepare to be boarded. Your species will be cataloged and assigned its proper place within the Empire's hierarchy. Resistance is futile and will result in your immediate destruction." Jake felt his jaw tighten. He had dealt with bullies before, and this alien sounded like the worst kind. "I'm sorry, but I don't think you understand. This is human space." "Do you have proper documentation for entering our territory?" The alien blinked all 4 of its eyes. "Documentation?" Lieutenant Commander Harper stepped forward. "Yes, sir. All foreign vessels entering human space are required to file a Form 47B with the Colonial Navigation Authority. You'll also need a valid visitor's permit and proof of insurance for your weapon systems." High Admiral Zefkar stared at her for a long moment. "I do not understand." "The Galaxy Empire does not require permission to travel through space. We are the supreme authority in this galaxy." "That's nice," Harper replied, checking her tablet. "But according to our records, you're not registered with any of our trade organizations. Are you familiar with the Interstellar Commerce Regulations? Section 1.2a clearly states that all armed vessels must declare their intentions before entering inhabited systems." The alien's mouth opened and closed several times. "Young female, you do not seem to comprehend the situation. The Galaxy Empire has ruled this galaxy for 50,000 years. We do not ask permission from primitive species." Chief Engineer Pete Collins looked up from his station. 50,000 years? Wow, that's a long time. "Do you have environmental impact assessments for all those years of space travel? The amount of radiation your engines must produce could be affecting local ecosystems." "Environmental impact assessments?" The alien's voice rose in pitch. "Oh yes," Collins continued. "It's very important stuff. If you're going to be discharging energy weapons in this sector, you'll need to fill out Form 23C and submit it to the Environmental Protection Agency. The waiting period is usually about 6 weeks." Jake watched the alien's face turn from blue to a darker shade of purple. "Admiral, I think there might be some confusion here. We're not a primitive species. We're the human race, and we've been spacefaring for over 2 centuries. We have our own government, our own laws, and our own territory. Your laws are meaningless, Zefker snarled. The Empire's word is absolute. You will submit or be destroyed. That sounds like a threat, said Security Chief Karen White, stepping forward. Are you aware that threatening a United Earth vessel is a federal crime? I'm going to have to ask you to tone down the hostile language. The alien looked confused. Federal crime? What authority do you claim over the servants of the Empire? Well, technically you're in our space, White explained patiently. So our laws apply to you? If you want to make threats, you'll need to file a declaration of hostile intent with the Department of Defense. There's a 48-hour waiting period. This is ridiculous, Zefker shouted. No species has ever spoken to the Empire in such a manner. You are insects compared to our power. Insects? Harper looked offended. Sir, that's hate speech. I'm afraid I'll have to report this to the Civil Rights Commission. Jake had to bite his lip to keep from smiling. His crew was handling this better than he had hoped. Admiral, I think. We got off on the wrong foot. Why don't you submit your paperwork, and we can discuss this matter through proper diplomatic channels? The alien's forearms waved frantically. Paperwork? Diplomatic channels? We are the Galaxy Empire. We do not engage in such bureaucratic nonsense. Then I'm afraid we can't help you, Jake said firmly. All interactions with human space must follow proper procedures. If you're not willing to follow our laws, then you're not welcome here. For a moment, the alien just stared at them. Then he turned to someone off-screen and began speaking rapidly in a language that sounded like angry music. After a few minutes, he turned back to the humans. This conversation is over. The Empire will return with proper authority to deal with your unusual behavior. The transmission ended, and the massive alien ship began moving away from the Defiance. Jake watched it disappear into the distance, then turned to his crew. Well, that was interesting. Harper, file a report with Earth Command. Tell them we've made first contact with something called the Galaxy Empire, and they seem to have some authority issues. Yes, sir. Should I mention that they don't have proper documentation? Jake smiled. Definitely mention that. And Harper? Yes, sir? Good work, all of you. I think we just confused the hell out of our first alien visitors. The bridge crew laughed, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. High Admiral Zefkar stood before the massive holographic display in the High Council chamber on Imperium Prime, the capital world of the Galaxy Empire. The chamber was enormous, with walls that stretched up into darkness. Around the circular floor, 12 towering figures sat on thrones made of different materials, each representing one of the galaxy's most ancient and powerful species. You were telling us, said Counselor Vexthara, her crystalline body reflecting the chambers. Lights, that a primitive species asked you for paperwork? Zefkar's forearms trembled slightly. Yes, Counselor. They treated the Empire's authority as if it were some sort of minor inconvenience. They spoke of forms and permits and waiting periods. Supreme Arbiter Calandris, his massive stone-like form barely fitting on his throne, leaned forward. In 50,000 years of galactic rule, no species has ever questioned our divine mandate. Perhaps they simply did not understand the translation? The translation was perfect, Zefkar replied. They understood every word. They simply chose to ignore it. One of them asked if we had insurance for our weapon systems. A low rumble filled the chamber as the council members discussed this unprecedented situation. War Master Thrakvin, whose species had conquered half the galaxy before joining the Empire, spoke up. Perhaps we should destroy them as an example to others. Wait, said Councillor Murgish, the eldest member of the council. In all our years of rule, we have never encountered a species that did not immediately submit to our authority. This requires careful consideration. What is there to consider? Demanded Thrakvin. They are insects. We crush them. These insects, Vexthara pointed out, seemed remarkably calm when faced with our power. That suggests either great courage or great foolishness. Colandris stood up slowly, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. I propose we send the fleet of Ascendancy to Earth, let them see the true might of the Empire. Surely when faced with our greatest ships, they will realize their error. The other council members nodded in agreement. The fleet of Ascendancy was the Empire's most impressive ceremonial force, designed to inspire awe and submission in newly discovered species. It had never failed to achieve immediate surrender. Meanwhile, on Earth, the news of first contact was spreading rapidly through human space. President Amy Roberts sat in the Oval Office, surrounded by her cabinet and military advisors. The holographic display showed footage from the Defiance's encounter with the alien ship. "So let me get this straight," said Secretary of State Rick Johnson. "These aliens showed up, demanded we surrender, and our people asked them for paperwork?" That's correct, sir," replied Admiral Susan Torres, Chief of Naval Operations. "The crew of the Defiance handled the situation according to standard first contact protocols." Defense Secretary Carol Stone shook her head. "Rick, these aren't just any aliens. They claim to rule the entire galaxy. If that's true, they have resources and technology far beyond anything we've ever seen. And yet," President Roberts observed, "they seem completely unprepared for basic diplomatic procedures. That's either a sign of arrogance or inexperience with resistance." "I recommend we treat this like any other international situation," Johnson suggested. "If they want to talk, they can go through proper channels. If they want to make threats, they can deal with the consequences." Stone looked worried. "Madam President, we're talking about beings who claim to have ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years. They could have weapons we can't even imagine." "Then we better hope they're reasonable," Roberts replied. "Because if they're not, we'll deal with that too." 3 days later, the fleet of Ascendancy arrived at Earth, the massive formation of ships stretched across space like a metallic constellation. At its center was the Eternal Glory, a dreadnought so large it could be seen from Earth's surface without a telescope. The fleet's commander, Grand Admiral Kethmer, was confident this display would end the humans' strange behavior. He had personally overseen the submission of over 300 species. None had ever resisted the fleet of Ascendancy. "Attention primitive species of the third planet," Kethmer broadcasted on all frequencies. "I am Grand Admiral Kethmer of the Galaxy Empire. You have insulted our authority and questioned our divine right to rule. You will immediately surrender your world and submit to integration into our glorious empire or face total annihilation." The response came from Earth's Orbital Traffic Control Station. Ben Walsh, a middle-aged traffic controller who had been directing cargo ships for 20 years, looked at his screen with mild annoyance. "Unknown vessels, this is Earth Traffic Control. You are currently in violation of orbital safety regulation 15C by maintaining an unauthorized formation in Earth's shipping lanes. Please disperse to minimum safe distance and report to the designated waiting area." Grand Admiral Kethmer blinked. "Waiting area?" "Yes, sir. All foreign vessels must wait for clearance before approaching Earth. The waiting area is located at coordinates 127.3 by 45.7, approximately 50,000 kilometers from our current position. Please relocate immediately." "I am Grand Admiral Kethmer of the Galaxy Empire," the alien repeated, his voice rising. "I do not wait for anyone." "I understand that, sir, but regulations are regulations. If you need to file a priority clearance request, you can contact the Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs. Their office hours are 9 to 5, Monday through Friday." Kethmer turned to his communications officer. "Put me through to their leaders immediately." "I can transfer you to the Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs," Walsh replied helpfully. "Please hold while I connect you." The transmission switched to a recording of soft music. A pleasant female voice announced, "Thank you for calling the Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs. Your call is important to us. Current wait time is approximately 3 hours and 22 minutes. Grand Admiral Kethmer stared at the screen in disbelief. Behind him, his bridge crew looked equally confused. In 50,000 years of galactic conquest, no one had ever put the Galaxy Empire on hold. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we've been waiting for 2 hours and 47 minutes. The music has repeated 136 times. This is intolerable, Kethmer snarled. Fire a warning shot across their planet. Sir, we're still in their shipping lanes. If we fire, weapons will be in violation of about 15 different safety regulations. I do not care about their regulations. Yes, sir, but they might file a complaint with the Galactic Commerce Authority. Kethmer paused. There is no Galactic Commerce Authority. There is now, sir. The humans established it yesterday and invited all spacefaring species to join. They sent us an invitation. The Grand Admiral looked at the invitation on his screen. It was written in polite, official language and included a detailed application process with multiple forms to fill out. This is madness, he muttered. Get me the High Council. While he waited for the connection, the hold music continued playing. The voice announced, "Thank you for holding. Your call is important to us. Current wait time is approximately 47 minutes. Kethmer slumped in his command chair. For the first time in his long career, he was beginning to understand why his predecessor had requested early retirement. On Earth, President Roberts received a briefing about the alien fleet's arrival. They're just sitting there, she asked. Yes, Madame President. They've been on hold with the Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs for over 3 hours, Roberts smiled. Well, that's one way to handle an invasion. How are our defenses? Fully operational, Madam President. If they want to fight, we're ready. Good, and if they want to talk? Then they can wait their turn like everyone else. After spending 4 hours on hold, Grand Admiral Kethmer finally reached a human representative. The young woman who appeared on his screen looked tired and slightly annoyed. Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs, this is Kelly Martinez. How can I help you today? I am Grand Admiral Kethmer of the GalaXY Empire, he began, trying to maintain his dignity. I demand to speak with your leaders immediately. I understand your frustration, sir, but you'll need to schedule an appointment. Our next available slot for new client meetings is Thursday at 2 o'clock. Thursday? Kethmer's voice cracked. That is 3 days from now. Yes, sir. We're pretty booked up. Would you like me to put you on the waiting list in case we get a cancellation? Kethmer closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Very well. Schedule the meeting. Great. I'll need your full name, organization, purpose of visit, and estimated duration of the meeting. 3 days later, the meeting finally took place aboard the neutral station that humans had quickly built in orbit around Earth. The station was simple but functional, with conference rooms designed for beings of different sizes and atmospheric requirements. Ambassador Helen Cruz led the human delegation. She was a middle-aged woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but her voice was firm and professional. With her were Trade Representative Alan Scott, a tall man with a friendly smile, and Cultural Liaison Officer Nina Bell, a young woman who took notes on everything. The Empire sent their most prestigious diplomats. Grand Negotiator Threnovik was a massive reptilian creature, whose species had been negotiating treaties for the Empire for over 10,000 years. He wore elaborate robes covered in symbols of his achievements. Behind him stood 2 assistants, carrying ancient scrolls and ceremonial weapons. Welcome to our station, Ambassador Cruz said politely. Please, have a seat. Can we offer you any refreshments? Threnovik looked confused by the casual greeting. We do not require sustenance. We are here to complete a sacred duty. Of course, Cruz replied. Well, let's get started then. The Grand Negotiator stood up and began speaking in a deep ceremonial voice. By the ancient laws of the GalaXY Empire, and in accordance with the divine will of Emperor Meldois Vea, I present to you the Articles of Submission. One of his assistants unrolled a massive scroll covered in strange writing. The document was beautiful, decorated with gold and precious stones, and it radiated aura of age and power. These articles, Threnovik continued, have been used to incorporate over 10,000 species into our glorious empire. You will sign them, and your species will become a protected subsidiary species under our benevolent rule. Ambassador Cruz put on her reading glasses and examined the document carefully. Trade Representative Scott leaned over to read it as well, while Cultural Liaison Officer Bell typed notes into her tablet. "This is very interesting," Cruz said after several minutes. "But I'm afraid we have some concerns about the terms." Threnovic's eyes widened. "Concerns? What concerns could a primitive species have about joining the greatest civilization in the galaxy?" "Well, for starters," Scott said, pulling out his own tablet, Article 7 states that humanity must provide 20% of its total production to the Empire. That violates the Fair Trade Agreement of 2387. Fair Trade Agreement? Threnovic looked at his assistants, who shrugged. "Yes," Scott continued. "It's an interstellar trade regulation that prevents exploitation of developing worlds. Any tribute over 15% requires approval from the Commerce Board." "There is no Commerce Board," Threnovic protested. "There is now," Bell said helpfully. "We established it last week. Here's your invitation to join." She handed him a neatly printed document. Cruz flipped through more pages of the Articles of Submission. "I'm also concerned about Article 12. It says that humans cannot own property or make independent decisions. That's a clear violation of the Universal Declaration of Sentient Rights." "What Universal Declaration?" Threnovic asked weakly. "The one we wrote yesterday," Cruz replied. "We sent copies to all known spacefaring species. You should have received one." Bell handed him another document. "We also included a helpful guide on implementing civil rights protections in multi-species organizations." Threnovic stared at the papers in his hands. "This is not how these negotiations work. Species are supposed to submit to the Empire, not suggest improvements to our laws." "Oh, we're not suggesting improvements," Scott said cheerfully. "We're offering an alternative proposal." He slid a thick folder across the table. "We'd like to propose that humanity join the Empire as equal partners with full voting rights and representation in your government." Threnovic opened the folder, and his jaw dropped. Inside were hundreds of pages of legal documents, charts, and diagrams. "What is this?" "Our counter-proposal," Cruz explained. "We've outlined a new governmental structure that would give all species equal representation based on population and economic contribution. We've also included a comprehensive taxation system that's fair to everyone." "Taxation system?" Threnovic flipped through the pages. "But the Empire does not tax its members. Tribute is given freely out of respect and fear." "Well, that's not very efficient," Scott observed. "A proper tax system would generate more revenue and provide better services to your citizens." Bell leaned forward. "We've also included a proposal for an interstellar Bill of Rights, worker protection laws, and environmental regulations. The Empire's current system doesn't seem to have any of these." Threnovic stood up abruptly. "This is impossible. The Empire does not negotiate with lesser species. We rule and you obey." "That is the natural order." "Says who?" Cruz asked mildly. "Says the Emperor," says the High Council. "Says 50,000 years of tradition." "Tradition isn't law," Cruz replied. "And just because something has been done for a long time doesn't mean it's right." Scott nodded. "Besides, your current system seems pretty inefficient. How do you handle disputes between species?" "What about trade regulations?" "What's your policy on environmental protection?" Threnovic opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. He looked at his assistants, who were reading the human documents with growing interest. We have never needed such things," he said finally. "The Empire's word is law, but whose word?" Bell asked. "If you have thousands of species under your rule, how do you make sure everyone's voice is heard?" "Lesser species do not have voices," Threnovic said, but his tone lacked conviction. Cruz smiled kindly. "That seems like a waste of resources. Some of those species might have good ideas about how to improve things. They might even have better ways of doing things than the Empire," Scott added. "Competition breeds innovation." Threnovic sat down heavily. "I do not understand. Are you refusing to join the Empire?" "Not at all," Cruz said. "We're just suggesting that the Empire might want to consider some reforms. Think of it as a merger rather than a takeover." "A merger?" Threnovic's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, Scott said enthusiastically. It would be much more profitable for everyone involved. We've run the numbers. Bell handed him yet another document. This is our economic analysis of the potential benefits. We think you'll find it very interesting. Threnovik looked at the paper, then at the humans, then back at the paper. I need to consult with my superiors. Of course, Crew said. Take all the time you need. We've also prepared a helpful guide on democratic decision-making processes in case that would be useful. As the Empire delegation left the station, Threnovik carried a briefcase full of human documents. For the first time in his long career, he was beginning to wonder if there might be a better way to run a galactic empire. On the human side of the station, the three diplomats watched the alien ship depart. Think they'll go for it? Scott asked. They'll have to, Cruz replied. Because if they don't, we'll just keep sending them more paperwork until they do, Bell smiled. I love this job. The High Council chamber on Imperium Prime was in chaos. Grand Negotiator Threnovik stood in the center of the room, surrounded by stacks of human documents that reached up to his shoulders. The ancient council members stared at the papers with expressions ranging from confusion to horror. They want to do what? Roared War Master Thrakvan, his massive form shaking with rage. They want to reorganize the entire empire, Threnovik repeated weakly. They have proposals for democratic voting, equal representation, worker rights, environmental protection, and something called a healthcare system. Councillor Vexthara picked up one of the documents with her crystalline fingers. This paper suggests that we should ask our subject species for their opinions before making decisions. That is absurd. It gets worse, Threnovik continued. They want to establish what they call a free press to report on government activities. They say transparency is essential for good governance. Supreme Arbiter Calandris slammed his stone fist on his throne. 50,000 years of perfect order, and these humans want to change everything because they filled out some forms? The forms are very detailed, Threnovik admitted. They seem to have thought of everything. From the shadows at the back of the chamber came a voice that made everyone freeze. Enough, Emperor Malthusvea stepped into the light. He was tall and pale, with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of millennia. He had ruled the Galaxy Empire for over 20,000 years, and his presence filled the room with an aura of absolute power. These humans have shown contempt for our authority, the Emperor said slowly. They have insulted our sacred traditions and questioned our divine right to rule. This cannot be allowed to continue. Yes, my Emperor, the council members said. In unison, deploy the Fear Fleet, Mathozai commanded. Let them see what happens to those who defy the Empire. The Fear Fleet was the Empire's most terrifying weapon. It consisted of massive warships designed not just to destroy, but to inspire absolute terror in anyone who saw them. The ships were black as space itself, covered in weapons that could crack planets in half. No species had ever seen the fear. Fleet and chosen to fight, War Master Drakethul commanded the fleet from his flagship, the Eternal Darkness. He was a veteran of 1,000 campaigns, and his species had evolved specifically for warfare. His forearms ended in razor-sharp claws, and his eyes could see in complete darkness. He had never met an enemy he could not defeat. Deploy the fleet around the human world, Drakethul ordered. Show them the full might of the Empire. The Fear Fleet arrived at Earth like a storm of black metal. There were over 200 ships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They formed a perfect sphere around the planet. Their weapons pointed downward at the blue and green world below. Drakethul opened communication channels to Earth. Pathetic humans, he growled. I am War Master Drakethul of the Fear Fleet. Your foolish resistance ends now. You have 1 hour to surrender. Unconditionally, or we will reduce your world to ash. The response came from Earth's Planetary Defense Command. General Roy Parker appeared on screen, a gray-haired man in a simple military uniform. He looked tired but determined. War Master Drakethul, this is General Parker of Earth Defense. Thank you for the advance notice. Our defense systems are now fully operational. Drakethul blinked in surprise. Defense systems? You dare to threaten the Fear Fleet? We're not threatening anyone, Parker replied calmly. We're simply following standard military protocol. When hostile forces enter our space, we activate our defenses. It's basic procedure. Your defenses are meaningless against our power, Drakeful snarled. We have weapons that can destroy entire star systems. That's nice, Parker said. Have you filed the proper environmental impact reports for weapons of that magnitude? The radiation alone would violate about 50 different safety regulations. While the War Master tried to process this response, something unexpected happened. Earth's orbital defense platforms began powering up. The humans had been busy during the weeks of negotiations, building defensive systems that the Empire had never seen before. The platforms used technology that seemed impossible. Instead of energy weapons, they fired solid metal projectiles at incredible speeds. The Empire's shields, designed to deflect energy blasts, were useless against simple chunks of metal moving at nearly the speed of light. Sir, reported Drakeful tactical officer, our forward scouts are taking damage from primitive kinetic weapons. Kinetic weapons? Drakeful stared at his displays. Who uses kinetic weapons in space combat? Apparently the humans do, the officer replied. And sir, they're very good at it. The situation got worse when human ships began launching from Earth's surface. These vessels were smaller than Empire ships, but they moved faster and used tactics that made no sense to the War-Master. Captain Steve Martinez commanded the UES Retribution, one of the first human ships to engage the Fear Fleet. His vessel was tiny compared to the massive alien warships, but it was fast and heavily armed with railguns and missile systems. All right, people, Martinez announced to his crew. These aliens think they can scare us with their big ships and scary names. Let's show them what humans do when someone tries to bully us. The Retribution dove straight at the nearest Empire ship, firing its railguns continuously. The alien vessel's shields flickered and failed under the sustained kinetic bombardment. Sir, reported the Retribution's weapons officer, their shields can't handle sustained kinetic impact. It's like they've never seen this kind of weapon before. Then let's give them a proper introduction, Martinez replied. The human fleet used tactics that the Empire had never encountered. Ships would ram enemy vessels, then detonate their reactors in suicide attacks. Others would use their superior speed to attack from multiple directions at once. Some human ships even launched their escape pods as kinetic weapons, turning life-saving equipment into improvised missiles. War Master Drakeful watched in horror as his supposedly invincible fleet began taking serious casualties. This is impossible, he muttered. No species fights like this. They show no fear of death. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving a message from one of the human ships. Put it through. Captain Martinez appeared on screen, his uniform torn and his face covered in smoke. Behind him, his bridge crew was working frantically to keep their damaged ship running. War Master Drakeful, this is Captain Martinez of the UES Retribution. I have a message for you. What message? Drakeful demanded. Martinez held up a small metal object. This is one of your survey probes. We found it drifting in space after your first ship visited us. He loaded the probe into a torpedo tube. We're returning it to you. The probe shot out of the torpedo tube at high speed, flying directly at the eternal darkness. It struck the massive ship's hull and bounced off harmlessly, but attached to it was a small sign that read, "Return to sender, postage due." Drakeful stared at the message in disbelief. They're mocking us. Yes, sir, his tactical officer. Agreed. And sir, we've lost over 60 ships. These humans are actually winning. For the first time in his long military career, War Master Drakeful felt something he had never experienced before. Doubt. The humans were not just resisting the Empire's authority, they were actively defeating it. And they were doing it while making jokes. Sir, his communications officer said urgently, the human fleet is requesting our surrender. Our surrender? Drakeful's voice cracked. Yes, sir. They say if we leave now, they won't file a formal complaint with the Galactic Commerce Authority about our unprovoked attack. Drakethel looked around his bridge at his confused and frightened crew. These humans had turned his mighty fear fleet into a laughingstock. They had treated his threats like minor inconveniences and his weapons like bureaucratic violations. "All ships," he ordered quietly, "withdraw from the human system." As the battered remains of the Fear fleet limped away from Earth, Drakethel sent a message to the High Council. "Mission failed. Humans are problematic. Recommend immediate diplomatic solution." On Earth, General Parker watched the alien ships retreat. "Well, that was easier than expected," he said to his staff. "Send a message to the surviving ships. Tell them they're welcome to reapply for entry to human space through proper channels. And if they want to file a complaint about our defensive actions," asked his aide. Parker smiled, "tell them to take it up with customer service." Emperor Malthoisvia sat alone in his private chamber, staring at the reports from the Fear fleet's defeat. In 20,000 years of rule, he had never faced a crisis like this. The humans had not only defeated his most powerful military force, but they had done it while treating the Empire like a minor administrative problem. "My Emperor," came a voice from the chamber's entrance. High Admiral Zefker entered, his 4 arms carrying data tablets and communication devices. "The situation is getting worse." "Explain," the Emperor said quietly. 3 more species have refused to pay tribute this month," Zefker reported. "They say they want to review their contracts with the Empire. The Zorkan Collective has requested copies of something called the Universal Declaration of Sentient Rights." Malthosvea closed his ancient eyes. "The humans' document. Yes, my Emperor. Word is spreading throughout the galaxy. Some species are asking why they never get to vote on Empire policies. Others want to know why they cannot trade freely with each other." The Emperor stood up slowly. At over 7 feet tall, he towered over most beings, and his presence had once been enough to end rebellions with a single glance. Now, for the first time in millennia, he felt uncertain. "Prepare my ship," he commanded. "I will go to Earth myself." "My Emperor," Zefkar said nervously, "is that wise? These humans seem to treat our authority as a joke." "Perhaps," Malthosvea replied, "it is time to discover why." The Emperor's personal vessel, the Divine Mandate, was the most magnificent ship in the galaxy. It was made of pure crystal and metal that seemed to glow with inner light. When it arrived at Earth, it appeared in the sky like a second sun, beautiful and terrible at the same time. President Amy Roberts received the news of the Emperor's arrival while she was reviewing trade agreements in the Oval Office. "The Emperor himself?" she asked her chief of staff. "Yes, Madam President. He's requesting a meeting with Earth's leadership." "Well," Roberts said, checking her calendar, "I have an opening at 7 tonight. Set up a state dinner. If the ruler of the galaxy wants to visit, we should treat him properly." The state dinner was held in the White House's largest dining room. The table was set with Earth's finest china and crystal, and the menu featured foods from around the world. President Roberts wore a simple but elegant blue dress, while her cabinet members were dressed in their best formal attire. Emperor Malthoisvea arrived expecting the usual ceremony that accompanied his presence. Throughout the galaxy, entire planets would shut down when he visited, and billions of beings would prostrate themselves before his divine majesty. Instead, he found himself being greeted at the door by President Roberts herself, who shook his hand and said, "Welcome to Earth, Your Majesty. I hope you had a pleasant trip." The Emperor stared at her outstretched hand for a moment before awkwardly shaking it. "You are not afraid," he observed. "Should I be?" Roberts asked with a smile. "Please, come in. Dinner is almost ready." The Emperor found himself seated at a round table, surrounded by human officials who treated him like any other foreign dignitary. Secretary of State Rick Johnson asked about his journey. Defense Secretary Carol Stone inquired about the Empire's economic policies. Secretary of Agriculture Tom Bradley wanted to know if the Empire had any experience with interstellar food distribution. "I do not understand," the Emperor said finally. "Do you not know who I am?" "Of course," Roberts replied. "You're the Emperor." of the Galaxy Empire. We've read your file. My file? Trade Representative Alan Scott pulled out a tablet. Yes, we've compiled quite a bit of information about your government structure. It's fascinating, really. A 20,000-year autocracy with no constitutional limitations on executive power. I am immortal, the Emperor said, as if that explained everything. I am divine. I do not require constitutional limitations. Immortal? Dr. Susan Wright, the chief scientist, looked interested. That's remarkable. Is it biological immortality? Or technological? We'd love to study the mechanisms involved. The Emperor blinked. You wish to study me? Well, not you personally, Dr. Wright clarified. But the science behind immortality could help millions of people. Have you considered sharing that technology with your subjects? They are not my subjects, the Emperor said automatically. They are my servants, Secretary of Agriculture Bradley frowned. That seems inefficient. If you shared immortality technology, you'd have a much more stable workforce. And healthier citizens are more productive citizens, added Health Secretary Linda Parker. Have you considered implementing a galaxy-wide healthcare system? The Emperor looked around the table at these humans who spoke to him as if he were just another government official. You do not understand. I am the supreme ruler of this galaxy. My word is law, my will is absolute. That's nice, President, Roberts said politely. But how do you make sure your laws are fair to everyone? Fair? The Emperor seemed confused by the concept. Yes, Justice Secretary Frank Miller explained. Fair means treating everyone equally under the law, regardless of their species or status. Different species have different roles, the Emperor said. The strong rule, the weak serve. That is the natural order. Says who? Asked Education Secretary Mary Foster. That sounds like something someone made up to justify keeping power. The Emperor stood up abruptly, his patience finally exhausted. Enough of this foolishness. I am Emperor Malthus Vea, divine ruler of the galaxy. I have the power to destroy entire star systems with a thought. To demonstrate, he raised his hand and lifted several objects from the table using telekinetic powers. Plates and glasses floated in the air around him, spinning slowly. That's very impressive, Dr. Wright said, taking notes. The energy field you're generating suggests some kind of psionic amplification technology. How does it interface with your nervous system? The Emperor stared at her. You wish to know how my divine powers work? Of course, Wright replied. If we could understand the technology, we might be able to help people with disabilities. Telekinetic prosthetics could revolutionize medicine. These are not technologies, the Emperor protested. These are divine gifts. Well, divine or not, they follow scientific principles, Wright observed. Everything does. The Emperor slowly lowered the floating objects back to the table. You are the strangest beings I have ever encountered. Why? President Roberts asked. Because we're not impressed by displays of power? Because you treat power as a tool to help others, not to control them, the Emperor said quietly. Secretary of State Johnson leaned forward. Is that so unusual? In my experience, the Emperor replied. Yes, President Roberts studied the ancient ruler's face. Your Majesty, may I ask you a personal question? You may ask. When was the last time someone asked you if you were happy? The Emperor sat down heavily. For a long moment he said nothing. No one has ever asked me that question. Well, I'm asking now. Are you happy ruling the galaxy? The Emperor thought for a long time before answering. I do not know. I have never considered the question. Maybe you should, Robert suggested gently. Because from what we've seen, your current system doesn't seem to be working very well for anyone. What would you suggest? The Emperor asked. And for the first time, he sounded genuinely curious. Partnership, Roberts replied. Instead of ruling over other species, work with them. Let them help you make decisions. You might be surprised by what they have to offer. 3 months later, the Galaxy Empire signed the Treaty of Earth, establishing the first interstellar democracy in galactic history. The Emperor retained his title but became the head of a constitutional monarchy with real power shared among elected representatives from every species, The transformation was not easy. Thousands of years of autocratic rule could not be changed overnight, but slowly the galaxy began to change. Trade flourished between species that had never been allowed to interact. Scientific discoveries accelerated as researchers from different worlds shared their knowledge. Art and culture bloomed as beings were finally free to express themselves. Emperor Malfoy's Vea found himself busier than ever, but for the first time in 20,000 years he felt purposeful. Instead of simply maintaining order through fear, he was helping to build something better. The humans established the Galactic Administrative Academy, teaching other species the fine art of bureaucratic efficiency. The Academy's motto was simple: the right form, filed properly, can move mountains. Ambassador Helen Cruz became the first Director General of the new Galactic Union, while President Roberts was elected to the first Galactic Council. When asked how humanity had managed to democratize the galaxy, Roberts simply smiled and said, "We just treated everyone like people instead of problems." And throughout the galaxy, beings who had spent millennia in submission began to learn the most powerful phrase in any language. Do you have that in writing?